and I'm standing in the background trying to remember some of the words, and I'm like, I'm not saying out loud. I'm not going to ridicule you because I'll poison your food. So go ahead.
Here's our cook.
But, to see them,
Very good
yeah, to see them the way they're going with the language, and the younger person's really picking it up, and the dad kind of struggling and saying that my daughter knows I'm saying it wrong, but she doesn't correct me. In the movie,
Yeah.
I've got 3 different dictionaries, and most of the words are spelled differently, and there's 3 different authors, and so when we have a little chat group that we do, we were trying to speak Abenaki back and forth. Well, I'm looking the word up, and Sherry would come back with something, and Bill would come back with something, and I'm going like mad in this dictionary, and they're going, "You're using the wrong dictionary, use this one." So I'd go to the next one. Then I'd see another Abenaki dictionary, oh, I gotta buy that one. Well, now you got 4 of them, and all the words are different.
Right.
So, and it depends on,
The B's and
Lawrence
P's,
was
yeah.
like, there was, he and a Jesuit priest came together and they started writing this dictionary. His son finally got it published. And I have the dictionary, and it's signed by him, and he's passed over now. And so this is my Bible. This is what I'm going by. And then all of a sudden, I meet these guys, and oh no, that's wrong. Well, what do you mean? Get this book. I'm like, how can one language have so many different things? And then you're right, picking up. Because I'm seeing all the different words, and I've looked at a lot of different documents online, trying to do genealogy for my family, and then looking at the Wampanoag writing and the deeds and so on, and then seeing it in the books, and I can hear them over there going, "Oh, 4." That's something we should do. You know?
Right.
But,
Go fish is easier than bingo.
right, yeah. I can play go fish. I can't.
The dictionary I use the most, that I think is the best, is one that the guy did that lived at Odenag, but he did it to teach Abenaki how to speak English. So it was sort of reverse. So, but I tend to like, there's a lot of conversations in there, so you can see how the words, dictionaries are hard just to look at a dictionary and
No, it's out of context.
yeah, it's just words.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know how important context is in Abenaki, but I'm sure it's important.
Very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things I loved hearing in the movie was about the discussion about the stars being animate and the sun being inanimate, and that the people had known that their sun did not move way before Europeans knew.
Right.
What do you see in your language that's like that, or the insight into how they saw the world that's different from how maybe we English speakers see the world?
Yeah, every words had meanings to them. Like, and there's a lot of words in New Hampshire that are Contoocook words, especially
Place names.
You know, like Contoocook. And there's some controversy over just what that means, but
I think one says it's the Piney River Bank. The next place says, the next person saying it's the place where the crows meet.
But I think the best one and I think it's right, is where the nuts on the nut.
Careful, I live there.
Yeah.
So the nuts gathered.
But years ago, the whole river was lined with butternut trees.
Oh.
So these words have meanings to them. You really, if you study native languages, it wasn't languages where they wasted they didn't want to waste a lot of time on a lot of being wordy over things, so they would just wanted to get their point across, I think, so everybody could just understand what they were talking about as easy as they could, you know. So a word can have, and it's different, I don't know, I'm not a linguist, so I'm not sure how to put it, but they're made up of they're long, there's a lot of them that are fairly long words, but they're made up of different parts that mean different things. Like
So that would be like the garden one, want me to show that one?
Yeah.
So Nebuchadnezzar is the Abenaki word for garden. And so Nebi is water, which like Sunapee is Sunipi. And part of what Darryl was talking about with the dictionaries being so different, so P and B are interchangeable in Abenaki. And sometimes it'll sound like P, sometimes like B, so that would explain why Sunipi or Nebi. But anyway, so Nebi is water, and Nebi cone is medicine. So water is like the basic piece of medicine. That's primary to medicine, is water. Water is what keeps us healthy. We need water to live. We're mostly water, right? So Nebi cone. And then Nisik is field, Nisek. And so Nebi cone Nisek is a medicine, a field full of medicine. So that's what the word garden means, and our gardens were always planted in the, a clearing in the woods, and never tilled. You tilled up, loosened up the soil, and mounded for the three sisters, the corn, the beans, and the squash, but you didn't plow at all, and so you would want your natural plants, your medicine plants, and your medicine plants would grow in the clearings, a lot of them. So that's a good example. Another one is Odanak. The word Odanak is, they said to the Abenakis people, or Abenakis, Penobscot, whatever, the Indians that wound up living there at that place, where do you live? So there had been a village there. This is in 1676 that the first people, which were Abenakis, settled in this village. And there had been French living there, so they were houses. These were wooden structured houses that French people had lived in, settlers, and for some reason had left. So it was an empty village of wooden structured houses. And the Jesuits offered it to the Abenakis people. So where do you live? Odanak. Well, AK or EK sometimes is what's called a locative in the language. This is some of the linguist stuff, the classroom, the academic stuff that drives us crazy when people want to shove that at us. But anyway, it is an important thing in the language. So that's a locative, a location. So Oden would be village in Abenaki. Odanak, at the village. So where do you live? I live over at the village. Well, they thought it was a name. So Odanak became the name of the town, but it wasn't the name of the town. It was just saying, every town. This is Odanak. Where do you live? Oh, I live over at the
Can
village.
you translate it be at the village?
Yeah.
Right, like, so it would be, okay.
So, anyway.
And I think native languages are the only ones that have locatives, right?
I think there's one other, something somewhere in Europe, one other. But yeah, it's unusual.
Yep.
So the inanimate's a little different than the feminine and masculine in, say, French. But another interesting thing is a blueberry is inanimate and a strawberry is animate.
Really? Why?
Good question.
Nobody's really sure, for sure. But one explanation sounds pretty plausible that I've heard, and that is that, this is Ely's theory, is that strawberry, it's on the ground, it's so much a part of the plant, whereas a blueberry, it's a tree, bushy, woody, and then the fruit hangs off it. But I don't think that totally
No, I don't
captures it
either.
either.
Because we have a Strawberry Moon Festival, we don't have a Blueberry Moon Festival.
I know in the Chinese language, there's a different name for mother's mother and
Yes, in
father's
our language
mother.
too,
In
yes.
your language too. So like, when I was growing up with English, I knew we had grandmothers, but I had no idea how they were different or the same. They were both grandmothers.
Right.
And then in your language,
Right.
a child would never confuse mother's mother with father's mother because there's a different word.
And it's even a different word if it's a boy saying it versus
Really?
if it's a girl
Oh,
saying
really?
it. So, in fact, yes in Abenaki is which if you grew up in New Hampshire, you say yes, a lot.
Wow.
But,
Or wicked.
that is
It's New Hampshire.
it's not Abenaki. Yes. So Nidomba is friend. So Nidomba, Darryl, Nidomba,
Keep making it
Jason.
cool,
But Nidomba, squaw, Cheryl. So squaw is the feminine adjective that would always be added because she's a woman. But anyway, yeah, Nidomba, squaw. I wouldn't necessarily say it if I was saying your name and it's a female name, but Nidomba, 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 squaw, no, Nidomba, squaw, Nidomba, squaw. And that one, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, what you're saying it, but because that's friend. But with relationships it doesn't. I don't know them all. They're really complex. She doesn't.
And then the words change if it's animate or inanimate that you're talking about.
Right.
So, animate is A-L, and I think, or is it A-K? I keep confusing.
Oh, for plural.
Yeah, for plurals.
Yep.
There's a different.
So we don't get to practice enough to be
No.
really good.
You can't, we don't, it's hard, it's.
In the summer, we get really, really good with,
Yeah.
and I loved what Jesse was saying about teaching. So this year, we have several teachers. We are fortunate with that. Ely teaches, and then there's a young man, Jesse Bouchak, and also a New Yorker teaches. But there's also Philippe Charland, who's French. He's not Abenaki, but he's the official teacher at Odenak. And so Philippe came down this year. And Philippe really left it for me to do a lot of the teaching. And he said, and it's true, I experience it, that in teaching is how you learn the best,
Yeah.
is putting yourself out there and doing a lot of the teaching. So our goal this year was to do total immersion and not have any Abenaki spoken while they're making baskets. And so a lot of people weren't committed to it. And the teacher didn't think we could pull it off. But anyway, there was one group of us that one afternoon did it. We never spoke a word of English. It was all Abenaki. And actually it was Jane Winterwolf. Jane said, at one point she's like, I am like getting it. I'm getting it. I'm understanding it. Andana iglissimo.
What was the religion of the native peoples that they were talking about being converted from?
So it's a very organic, like the English called it pagan. And today you'll still hear a lot of Indian people say I'm pagan. But I have friends who are pagan, and Native American is not pagan.
It was more spiritual than an actual
Organized
religion.
Mhm.
It was more spiritual, as being in tune with Mother Nature, being in tune with the way that the sun moves, the way that the moon moves, you know, the 13 moons, instead of 12, it's 13 moons. They're really connected with the plants and the trees and the air and everything. Everything is connected to everything. The animals, from the tiny little grasshopper to the bears. You know, everybody was related some way or another, including the trees. You know, the trees live and breathe, and you touch a tree and you can feel its life. So they were all connected spiritually that way. It wasn't an organized religion. And you know, when the Pilgrims came over, they came over as the Pilgrims they were outcasts of England. They were coming over and spreading that they needed to convert everybody in the Word of God and Jesus Christ, and you know, it was they were killing natives because of that. So that's why there's a lot of Native Americans that really have a hard time with Christianity, but then there's some that were converted to Christianity. So it's a deep spiritual. When you talk to a Native American, they hold a lot of spirituality.
Threw away all theirs.
Yeah.
And the term you'll hear is traditional versus non-traditional. So Indians that practice the old ways, which the faith, that spirituality. And dreams are really, really important part of Native American spirituality. And in fact, the dream world is more real than the awake world. And Margaret Mead talked some about that in her work in South America, I remember. But it's very, very true for Native people. Black Robe is a really good movie about the Hurons that shows a lot of that. And Abenaki, our people were all part of the Huron Confederacy. So in New York, they had the, what's it called? Confederacy. Iroquois. And, but our people were part of that Huron Confederacy. So if you watch that, you'll see a lot of, that movie, Black Robe, has a lot about the dream world and the importance of the dream world and getting our messages.
I don't know. Oh, sorry. I don't know if you can answer this question, but I have a daughter who's 6, and she's just getting ready, in first grade. They hear the Thanksgiving story certainly the story is told of how the Indians saved the Pilgrims and taught them how to grow food. Is that a story that you would want told that way?
They
That
did.
part- that part of it is
That
true.
part is true.
Yeah, I just feel like, what should I tell her, you know, about, like, and then in gratitude, the Pilgrims rose up and killed all the Indians. I don't know if I really want to say that part.
It was sort of like the Last Supper.
They did, they stole, what happened was, you saw in the movie, it was the Wampanoag people, that so many had died, but it had to have been really recent. They said 4 years, but because if you read the early accounts, they were finding all the, our food was always stored in food cellars, dig
In the
holes in the
ground?
ground, yeah. And so they were finding all the corn and everything stored up for the winter, and they just helped themselves, stole it basically. And so,
Finding it from people who died, or finding it from migrant tribes
they
who
were
were gonna
finding
come
it, and
back
that's
for it?
unclear to me. I mean,
Got it.
because it's not my tribe and I don't know
Oh,
the history that well down south, but that's, then there's the Narragansetts that were there too, and then Squanto, who was one of our people, went down.
Squanto was taken, yeah, he was taken overseas, and he was brought to Europe, and he was modernized, and he could speak the English language
Right.
well, and they brought him back, and he came back, and he was talking with all the natives, and he could speak both, and he was all, had his nice clothes
English
on.
clothes, yeah.
They assimilated him right into their culture, and you know, kind of stole him, and showered him with all sorts of good things, and these new things and stuff. But he, yeah, he was able to communicate with them, and telling them all the good things that the English would do, and they kind of realized that in a real quick way when all the disease came. Before the white man came, there was no disease. You know, you could go walk out on a nice cold winter night, the snow, and wear no clothes hardly at all, and you wouldn't catch a cold. You know, there wouldn't be anything, because you'd be strong. There would be, you know, your resistance would be up. And then as soon as the white man came over with, you know, the smallpox and everything, decimated that, there was more people lost from disease, natives lost from disease and everything.
I think like 90%, 95%.
Well, that was a surprising part to me in the movie, because I thought that the disease came with the Pilgrim, but the movie implied that the disease came before with the fishermen.
Fishermen,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
on the Maine
I
coast,
didn't
and
know that.
blankets, and it's well proven
Yeah.
that
So did the
I forget the guy's name, but he was commander of the forces in England at the time, and so they had used the poison blankets, the infected blankets, with Scotland or Ireland, or there's another war they were carrying out, Flanders Field, I think, was part of that, where it's well documented that they had used those blankets. So it's not just Indian paranoia that it was, and then later on out west, it was very clearly documented that those diseases. So those 1616 things and what was happening, definitely like Squanto, the way he learned that was by the fishermen coming, and they would speak English, and they would trade them blankets and kettles and beads and stuff for the furs. And so it's pretty well believed that, and there's a lot of circumstantial, proof that, yeah, the blankets were. But the Abenakis didn't get hit hard.
No.
And they survived well. The inland New Hampshire natives survived much better than it was the coastal that were wiped out. So is that because they had less contact, or is it because they were hardier? We don't know.
I don't know. I mean, if you listen to David Stewart Smith, when he talks back in the 1600s, at some point, if you were 5 miles out of Boston, you were right in the wilderness.
Right.
And then if you were north of Boston, you were in Canada.
Right.
So nobody got far from the ocean as far as Europeans. I mean, other
Right.
than a few people trying to map a few things or something, but it was mostly fishermen. Well, early 1500s, and even earlier than that.
Right.
way before Columbus, they were coming over here fishing off
Right.
the coast, yeah, and there was contact. So natives had really been dealing with Europeans for quite a number of years before the Pilgrims came. Yeah.
Questions?
So do you know if has any university ever been, I mean, they had MIT behind them. Had Dartmouth or anybody ever really plunged into
Not Dartmouth, it will not be Dartmouth.
They'll never do that.
Dartmouth just, Dartmouth was established to serve Abenaki people.
Right.
But, no, they have a Native American program. In fact, we just last year got a Commission on Native Affairs put through the legislature, and Darryl and I are both on it. The Senate last year added 5 professional positions, and one of them was the director of the Dartmouth Native American program. That should be a resource for local Indian people, right? Right? Huge land grants, own huge tracts, hundreds of acres in northern New
Hundreds,
Hampshire.
thousands and thousands.
Thank you. See, I don't always exaggerate. Tell Marty I don't always exaggerate something I underestimate. And they don't even bother coming. These are Mohawk people that is the closest to what would be here, so New York, but primarily it's Western Indian people, and they have no desire to contribute to
To local
us.
people talking about that when we had the religion screening, if I
Mhm.
remember the name.
So please,
it's
yeah, don't
disheartening
bring
to
that
know
up
that-
as like it's a resource for us. Although I will say that Dartmouth has, so Gordon Day wrote the most recent dictionary. So, and Gordon was non-Indian, and he lived in Hopkinton, actually. He was from Hopkinton, and he spent his whole life studying, and he really cared very deeply about the Abenaki people and culture. And he worked part-time for Dartmouth. Well, for many years he was with Dartmouth, but he was also with the Museum of the Civilization of Man out of Ottawa in Canada. So he taped speakers from, I just wrote, I applied for a fellowship. I don't know, I haven't heard yet if I'm going to get it or not. But anyway, I think it was like from like 58 to 1965 or something like that. Anyway, he spent quite a while, and all these reels of tape exist at Dartmouth and at Ottawa. And they've never been cataloged. We're not sure if they're all transcribed or not. If they are, the transcriptions are in Ottawa. There have been some linguists that have worked with the language, and then Bach out of, he's with UMass at Amherst, and there's a couple other, Philip Secord at Indiana, I think. But Gordon, who was really an ethnohistorian, was the one, and Gordon died several years ago, so then the dictionary got published.
Mhm.
It's out of print now. And we don't even have the rights to reprint it. This Civilization of Man in Ottawa has the rights, so a lot of it's heartbreaking, but we do our can.
So tell me about your fellowship. What is it?
My fellowship is to put all that together, and so go up and find out how much of it has been transcribed, and does any of it need to be transcribed. And then the goal will be to digitalize all of the collection, and then have it all available on a website, so that, because as Bill was telling you, I mean, it's very, very hard when you have community members all over Vermont. There's no reservation, there's no
Central location.
There's no central location, and so if we can get it, Jason's in Loudon, and Darryl's in Contoocook, and we're in Warner, so that we can do quite a bit. And to top off the complications of the distance, Jason's in Loudon, and he's a police officer there, so his schedule's, and he's importantly needed there. They got that pesky racetrack with all the trouble that goes on. So, and other matters that we've heard in the news lately. So anyway, it makes it challenging in terms of time frames and getting together. So the internet would be an important thing to do that, and just making sure, and those voices, so right now those are not a resource open to the public, because the other thing is, part of what Bill was talking about. So when these speakers were still speaking, and there were more of them and they were still speaking, Gordon would go up and ask them to talk. Well, some of them were basically gossiping about other people at Odenak. And so, then there's this individual who won't be named who, well, I have a master's degree in community psychology, so just whatever, I'll leave it at that. But he's not Abenaki, but he's quite convinced the descendants of these speakers that this is really sacred, important, and disturbing. And do you want to give permission to other people? So it sort of got set up like Abenaki people weren't allowed access to this unless they went through him.
Ooh.
At least that's what we were all told. But then I learned, no, that's in his mind. Like, Dartmouth didn't really have that rule, but Dartmouth didn't really communicate with us, so we didn't know that. So anyway, so part of it is just getting access to these tapes, finding out what are the translations. Is there really sensitive material that should be kept out, and stuff that's not sensitive material? This is a wealth of, as they said, they didn't get to, the Wampanoags did not have speakers. They had to figure all that out and count on the ancestors to speak to her in dreams. We don't have to, we have the ancestors speak to us on tape that Gordon left for us. And so it needs to be made available, and yeah.
Oh, I hope you get the fellowship.
Thank you.
I think your passion is wonderful.
Thank you. And David Waters from UNH, he's a legislator as well, but he's a professor of English and runs, I wasn't prepared to talk about all this, and I have to look it all up because I do too many different things. Anyway, David runs a really important center that's funded by the National Endowment for the Humanities from UNH on culture. I apologize, I don't know the name of it.
It's okay.
But anyway,
Fascinating.
and so he was very, very supportive of the fellowship, and the linguists wrote letters of support, strong letters of support. So I don't know. We'll see.
When will you find out, do you think?
I don't know. I've been going to look it up. I've been kind of feeling like, because I haven't heard, probably isn't looking good. But
So positive thoughts your way. Well, I'll be thinking of you anyway.
and next year we'll reapply. There's also a sound technician who's Abenaki, who's going to help Barry Higgins. And Dartmouth will be ready to write its own strong partnership letter next year. By the time we found out about this, it was a short turnaround, and as the librarian said, Dartmouth is a big ship that turns very slowly. And so that's hopeful.
Well, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate it. The next film for next month is Troop 1500. If you'd like to come, it's going to be the second Tuesday of December. And it's about a Girl Scout troop that's uniting daughters with mothers who've been in prison.
Oh, how nice. Nice work.
So I can't really read the whole thing.
That's okay.
So
You need
it's
longer
something very
abs.
interesting.